Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Sales Chatter. I'm your co-host, Ryan Mohammed. With me is my amazing co-host, President and CEO of RGTX Logistics Solutions, Jeff Dickinson. How you doing this morning, brother?
Good, my man. How is everybody doing this morning?
We're awesome. We've got an amazing jam-packed episode. We've got Ken Adamo, Chief of Analytics at DAT Solutions, filling in
Morning.
for Dean Croak today. So let's get started, guys. We've got a lot to talk about.
Let's do this.
To the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly.
You gotta apologize. That's my internet's not working so well today, so we're streaming from LTE. So shout out to Rogers Internet if you're in Toronto. Another letdown from Rogers Internet. But let's get started here. Ken, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. I was actually watching the last time you were on last year, and it was night and day. It was night and day. Jeff had a little bit of a lesser beard. I had a crappy setup, and you're still rocking out the hat. So welcome to the show. Guys, we said we're excited to have you on this morning to talk about a lot of things on here and kind of go back to the theme. But I watched yesterday's DAT IQ live show, your first one of the year with Dean. Can you guys give a little bit of a rundown of what you guys kind of talked about yesterday, and we could kind of get started from there?
Yeah, I think the big story that we talked about yesterday was surprisingly strong finish to the year. I think the quote I used yesterday was rumors of the demise of peak were greatly exaggerated. Those last few weeks of 2022 saw some freight moving around, some relief on fuel prices, which I'm sure was very well received from carriers. Over 1 million loads posted on our load board last week to start the year off, even being a week shortened by Monday being the observed New Year's Day holiday. So, that was really the 2022 going out with I wouldn't say a bang, but more of like a pop to kind of level set. And then now we're just waiting to see how low things and how slow things get as we head into the post-return season. That's really, anyone who's been in logistics for a while knows this is the doldrums.
That's it.
That's what I'm going to talk about, because I know that I was watching another podcast that you were on earlier last year, and the something that you talked about was that, hey, the contract normalized rates kind of going positive by looking at Q3, and that move freight will kind of be like in the negative for basically for the foreseeable future. Can you elaborate on that a little bit, Ken?
Yeah, so what do we need to see? This is what we're walking a lot of our customers and partners through. What do we need to see to know that the market's going to start heading back up? And one of those things is this normalization between spot and contract. So there's quite a bit of a gap still left to close. A lot of RFPs were ran at the end of last year, and those rates will be put into place, or they already have. Right, a lot of shippers use this slow time to put all their rates in their TMS, clean up garbage rates, or remove carriers that haven't moved freight in a while, and they're doing a lot of like TMS maintenance and all of that in their ERP systems. So a lot of those rates are going to go into effect now, and even if they bid 6, 9, or 12, traditional 12-month contracts, that freight that was awarded at these rates will move all year. So that's the thing to think about. Contract has that delay, right? You sign that piece of paper, and we could talk for hours about the validity of freight contracts, but let's just assume that that's like any other contract. That freight's going to move under that rate at a minimum for this foreseeable future. So that's why we think contracts probably won't normalize till later this year, if not this year at all. But we are seeing some very positive signs that spot rates are most likely bottoming out and will head up, probably to coincide with spring shipping season, produce, and all that fun stuff. Nothing crazy, right? It's not going to be like COVID. We all need to remember, we've all been in this game long enough to know that it's not going to be like COVID. It's not going to be like the polar vortex of 2021 and the Delta variant where rates went up $1 a mile. It's not going to be like that, but it'll probably be more like a normal freight cycle.
Yeah, it was just a little gradual, incline, if you will. But, you get back to the RFPs and the shippers and the contractual agreements for, 12 months. A lot of times, Ken, and I have seen this where the reps underestimate what the contract rates are on specific lanes, and they come back to you like 3, 4, maybe 5 months later and go, "Hey, listen, guys, I just analyzed my rates and our OR is through the roof. We're going to have to take a 3% increase. I mean, I've seen that happen, when they cut themselves short. And a lot of the shippers, they sit down and they have these conversations with them saying, hey, we want to work with you. Where do you need to be? I understand the market was here. Now it's there. And it's a volatile time right now. It really is. It's all over the place. And, those contractual rates are starting to get pulled in like a vacuum, and just the sustainability for long term. I just don't see that. What are your thoughts on that?
This is the hardest. It's the number one question from brokers and has been from 3 to 4 months. I'm tech savvy. I buy data. I stay informed on the market. I know, when you're at a bottom, you don't want to lock in long term as a broker or as a carrier, obviously as a carrier.
Yeah.
But I have competition that might not be as savvy as me or as prudent or frankly as ethical. And they're willing to say, look, I'm going to lock in at these super low rates, Mr. or Mrs. Shipper, and then I'm just going to tear those up in 3 months when the market turns. How do I talk to my shipper about the fact that rates, you and I both know, Mr. and Mrs. Shipper, rates are going to go back up. They're lowballing you and they're going to not honor that contract. And so I think the number one mechanism has been proactively going after shorter bid lengths and say, look, if you want me to match their price, I'll write a 3 or a 6 month contract at the current market. It's probably not going to move too much off where we are today over 3 or 6 months.
Right.
But I can't hold these for 12 months. I can't hold at a market bottom but what happens at we all have to think about what happens at the bottom and at the top of every market cycle, whether it's freight or anything else. The market becomes overbought and oversold.
Yep.
And that's just sort of not gonna. It's happened as long as we have data. It's happened. I've been in the not as long as some folks, but I've been doing this pricing freight for over a decade, and it's just what happens. People they enter the industry at the top, assuming that freight's always going to pay $250 a mile. They go buy a truck, and they were dead before they knew it. And then there's brokers that lock in long-term contracts at market bottoms, and then they realize 4 or 5 months later, there's no way they can operate that freight.
Right. And a lot of the reps out there they'll put that buffer in there on the off season and the peak season. So you got that little bit of a nice little balance across the year where you'll save a lot in the beginning and spend a little bit more on the end or vice versa, depending upon the way the market is swinging. So those are the guys that are the smarter ones. And the shippers are like, yeah, okay, I can get that as long as I have some type of sustainability for my forecasting and budget for each quarter, biannually, annually, we'll go with that. But if the guys that come in on the low side, anybody that really signs off on that really got to think about that, because if you know the market's just not sustainable. It's just not. They're going to come back to you at some time and they're going to say, like I said before, we have to take an increase, and that's not the right way of selling. It really isn't.
No, and that can lead to you getting on the no-fly list for that customer. I mean, I remember when I was at one of the largest, I was at FedEx, right? And there were accounts that we weren't even allowed to go in, and I couldn't even attend a sales call because they said, you know what, you didn't honor a contract 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and that leaves a bad taste in their mouth, right?
Oh, you get red flagged. You do.
Yeah.
You get red flagged because they don't want to hear that. I mean, I used to be very upfront and tell a sales rep, okay, fine. Well, if you can do it for this, I don't want you coming back in 3 to 6 months and saying, oh, Jeff, I got to take it 3 to 4%. It's just not going to happen that way. So price accordingly and keep it, sustainable over time. And I just seen it over the years, Ken, that a lot of them don't do that. They just go for the quick kill, as I say, and then they eat their words.
Yeah. I mean, it's not really a tool that's available to smaller players, but a lot of the mid-sized to larger players really got into index contracts with their big shippers throughout this volatile 2.5 years, right? They said, look, DAT puts a number on their website, just like they do with the ocean, right? With Freightos or the Baltic Dry. Like, we put a number on our website, it doesn't change. And every 2 or 3 months, we'll true up against that number. And if that number went up 3%, we might not raise your rate 3%. We might raise it a third of that, right? So you're insulated on 67% of the risk, and we're going to capture 33% of the market movement.
Right. And a lot of the shippers out there, too, if they're very, very smart, they'll use their own FSC tables instead of using individual fuel surge charge tables from every single carrier up there, because now everything is going up and down all over the board. And it's a lot easier that way because unfortunately, a lot of brokers out there, they put margins on top of fuel, which is unethical, at least the way I look at it. And they should be concentrating on their base rates, not the fuel, and let the fuel go where it is so that there's a perfect understanding between you and the shipper, how that's going to work over time as the market changes.
Yeah. I mean, that should transcend just your sales strategy. If you're a broker, I don't care how big you are, you should be at least allocating on the accounting side what portion of that rate was fuel and base, because what if fuel goes down 25%? Quarter over quarter, you could see a decline in revenue and not be able to trace back what happened, right? The market didn't move. It's just the fuel moved, right? So 25% of 10% of the revenue, you could see a 2.5% drop in your revenue with nothing to do with rates or volumes moving. So that was a huge deal when fuel started moving around, up and down.
Yep.
It's crazy to think about. And, Ken, for the last week and this week, we're going with themed weeks on the show now. So basically we pick a topic and we kind of spread that out for the 4 days that we kind of go live. And I think something that's relevant to you because we're talking about planning before you make that first phone call. Do you see an increase in bigger brokerages bringing on experts like yourself to come talk to like their training team and their sales reps? Maybe it's once a quarter, maybe it's biannually, to basically say, hey, this is where the market is. Because there's so many resources that you can watch the DAT IQ show. You can watch our show as well. But do you see people are actually looking to do that to bring you guys into live in person?
That's a great question.
If that's all I did, I mean, that's where Dean's at. I mean, Dean, I'm sure you saw the news this morning. All flights are grounded. All domestic United States flights are grounded. Dean's actually going to speak to a group about the market and the state of the market and all that stuff. Like, if that's all we did, if we said yes to every request, that I would have no other job responsibility, right? And I think the ones we tend to say yes to are when it's, like agency-based models are great because they get together maybe once a year, maybe twice a year, and you've got several hundred people. And they're all kind of running their own businesses. So you're talking to a couple hundred business owners all at once, and then some of our strategic folks. But COVID has one of the big positives coming out of COVID is it's allowed things like this show. I know people watch. I tune in. What we do. There's a lot of other really great sources where you don't have to get on a plane anymore, right? You can sort of stay abreast of the baseline signal, and then it's much easier for us to pop an hour on our calendar with a partner of ours to do a deep dive than hop on a plane. So the other good thing is freight tends to be centralized in pockets. You can go to Dallas and hit 5 to 7. You can go to Chicago and probably hit 7 to 12.
Yeah.
Go to Atlanta now and hit a few. So yeah, when markets move, that's when people are extremely interested in this type of thing.
Well, they should have their finger on the pulse. If not every day. I mean, because that's how quickly the market changes. I mean, I'm not preaching to the choir by any means, but you see it. I mean, it's all over the board, man. It's definitely changed over, the last 24 months for sure. Absolutely. Just who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
I'm not an old timer here, right? But I mean, I can remember not that long ago, we would gather in our brokerages, the top executive brokerage at FedEx's office once a quarter when the TIA market report came out, and thumb through that and say, like, how are margins changing by brokerage size? How are average shipment count? Like, did our shipment count increase or decrease along with these other cohorts that they've been tracking? And now you still have that report, but you have tons of other information. And what I think has been interesting, a lot of the brokerages have started producing shipper-focused market updates. I know like Arrive Logistics does a great job. Echo does a good job. Robinson's always done it. And, the list goes on and on. But they've recognized that keeping their shippers informed only helps benefit their relationship with the business. So
sure, absolutely. And a big indicator that I used to watch, for many years is the casuals that FedEx and UPS hire. And when you don't see that huge hiring spree, you know that there's something wrong that's going on there, because especially over the Christmas season, man, they're hiring those casuals, getting in there. Packages are going like wild. They're doing about, I think, 119 stops a day per driver. And all of a sudden it starts falling out. The volumes are falling through the floorboards. It's a good indicator of what's happening in the market as well.
I agree. I mean, we're very fortunate in this day where we sit here in 2023, we have access to more. I mean, and again, I think what we start coaching folks on is now the important part is cutting signal from noise, right? Making sure you're not getting the wrong information or kind of analysis paralysis, right? I mean, once you've get into the groove of what information you need to kind of, you're not going to make huge course corrections on your strategy week to week, right? Your strategy should be rather stable, and then you're pivoting more of the tactical differences you might want to make day over day, week over week, and maybe revisit your strategy once a quarter, once a half, that kind of thing.
Yes, you have to definitely reevaluate things, and then keep your customers up to date on it. Lack of communication is a killer, especially in this market right now. And don't be afraid to have that conversation with your customers and saying, we have to take an increase. I mean, I did one at the beginning of the year that I had an increase over $1,000. I was like, this person's not going to go with it. No way, and they took it. And I was very, very surprised. And it's not like I wanted to, but the market demanded. And if they wanted to have that capacity and the service levels that they demand, they had to pay for it, and I did not up my margins on that. I had to do what I had to do, but I also had to say what I had to say. And those are the honest conversations that you have to have with your customers.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this, and again, I think it's just to fill dead air, but a lot of the sense around like shippers taking revenge and all of this and that is not what I've observed in the market, right? I think shippers by and large are pleased that service has returned to somewhat normal levels. They're very interested in protecting that service. Sure. They're, of course, going to want to take advantage of the cost concessions that the market's affording them right now. But I certainly don't think there's any kind of overreaching of cost mitigation happening at the shipper level. What we are seeing that I think is extremely interesting, it's more of like a romantic fallacy that these shippers dip their toe into the spot market, right? That there's like these pools of traffic managers that have nothing better to do but like once every 2 years to go move spot freight, right?
Yeah.
That's
but what we are seeing though,
killer, because what happens is it shows no loyalty to their carrier base that they have on board. And so when they get into a pinch and they need those carriers to come back on board, the first thing they're going to say is, well, what the hell have you done for me lately? You kicked me to the curb. You went to the spot market. I know it because you're going for the cheaper rates. And now you want me to come back to help you with capacity.
Yeah, it's kind of good from there. But it's a great topic that you brought up, because actually yesterday my team and I, we had a call with a company that's one of our customers that they do $1 billion. Their revenue is over $1 billion, and they were saying the same thing. Like, we had that conversation saying that he's churned through so many carriers, and it's like, why would you waste your time kind of doing that, right? And it's just like, hey, I actually brought up the line, and we're kind of coming back to even stuff that we're talking about, is that like, hey, I hate making calls as much as you hate receiving them. So let's work together. Let's see where we can kind of go from there. And, as we're kind of talking about like the different shippers and things like that coming into it, it's like, okay, well, let me be a resource rather than being an order taker. And that's where you're going to kind of have that conversation. But Ken, I got a question for you. I don't know if you guys have kind of answered it yet on DAT or had internal conversations, but something that's fascinating to me, Ken, is really AI. Chat GPT has been something that I took a look at a couple weeks ago, and I saw yesterday that Microsoft is actually investing $10 billion into the company that owns ChatGPT. But the question that I have for you is that, do you see data being readily available through AI in the future? Things like what you guys kind of do, like on the DAT show with the education?
Yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of different forms, right? Predictive rating, those are all more classic approaches to AI. I think what you're going to start to see is a lot more predictive scheduling, a lot of more accurate ETAs. I mean, that's kind of an industry buzzword, but the sense of like, it doesn't always take, what's the industry standard for calculating ETAs? You divide the distance by 45 miles an hour on average, and that's your sort of baseline ETA. But as we learn more and as we get more, I mean, there's companies out there like buying traffic camera data to more accurately update and use AI to predict when they're going to have a service failure or a service disruption, so they can get out ahead of that with the customer or dynamically reroute things. So I think that's part of it. So you have like the pricing, that's more of an operational application of these technologies. And then on the customer service side, I mean, that's where that industry hasn't really taken a huge leap forward since like the nuances of the world. If you're not familiar, that's the companies like when you call 1-800 go FedEx, the voice robot that answers your question, and instead of the press one, right?
Yeah.
But what you're finding is, as people are, as younger folks are coming into supply chain, they like online chat perhaps more than they like picking up the phone and calling. I mean, I know that how often I probably talk on the phone 2 or 3 days a week, tops 2 or 3 times a week, but I'll text and I'll chat. And if an online retailer has an option for an online chat versus an email or a call, I'm going to pick the chat 100 out of 100 times. So then you have like that communication and internal efficiency piece. Just like with driverless, though, I think there's a level of complexity in freight that doesn't exist as much in parcel, and certainly not in personal transportation, right? So it's like always the difference between Uber and Lyft and then Uber Freight, right? Those are very different paradigms, and they're much harder to do, I feel. Like the level of automation will be more frictious than with small package and with personal transportation.
Yeah, and you know what? Just to add on that, there's so many different things with AI. First of all, you're talking about the predictability and ETAs and everything like that. The one thing that a lot of people forget is the act of God. Nobody has control over that, and that's unpredictable. You can't control that. When it happens, it happens. And of course, that throws a monkey wrench into the ETA statistics and blows that, kind of like out the door. But the other thing is when you get into FedEx and UPS and you're looking at final mile deliveries and the physical aspect of taking that package and putting it on that doorstep, I don't believe autonomy AI vehicles doing that kind of work. We're far from that, because you physically have to take that package out of that box truck and walk it up to the door to put it on that, So getting it to that address, yes. Another thing, how are they going to get it out? It's the same thing with loading on warehouses, until they have some type of apparatus that can go from pick the inventory, go down a track into the truck and load the truck, and then the truck takes off. It's like, okay, what about liftgate deliveries and all of that kind of stuff? Who's going to do that? Where's the person? Are they going to stop white glove deliveries and inside deliveries? I mean, there's just a lot of things that you have to take into consideration when you're developing this new type of technology. That maybe they are, but we haven't really heard too much about that.
Yeah, I will say, especially on the shipper side, because shippers to shipper, like when you think introspectively, a shipper doesn't think of themselves as a shipper. It's the biggest thing we struggle with here with like marketing and with sales and all that stuff. It's like Coca-Cola is a beverage producer. I mean, if you really kind of take them out for drinks, they're really a marketing company, right? They don't even, there's like all the intricacies of the bottle. But regardless, you got to realize like they have probably 50 systems they're dealing with. Their TMS, their WMS, their contractor payment system, their employee time card system, their training system, their safety system, their vendor management system, their ordering. Like, so, I mean, where AI, like the nitty gritty, where AI, there's AI and ML, but where I think AI has like this huge potential is to help seamlessly and like self-heal some of these connection points, if you will, where if your WMS isn't talking to your TMS, isn't talking to your order fulfillment system, you have a huge problem, right?
Or your YMS too.
Yeah, and think about trailer management. I mean, that's like what I call like the other TMS, like it's like the other OSU with Oregon State or Oklahoma State, but like trailer, like I actually was our hunting camp over the weekend with a 30-year driver for Pitt, Ohio, and it's just fascinating. We're talking to him about like their trailer management is always been recognized as being above average, right? Pitt, Ohio does a really good job, and the LTL companies kind of have to, but he's constantly amazed when he goes to shows or talks to other companies that like they're in the Stone Age. They're using, in some cases, spreadsheets to manage where trailers are, right? And how do you move into intermodal repositioning of trailers and containers if you're not really using like modern technology to expedite and make that process more accurate and efficient?
To show you,
a big company might track some of their trailers by spreadsheet.
Yeah, I've actually seen some of those actually kind of happen too, and that's where it's going to be to like take care of the little tasks that, hey, maybe adds a couple minutes to my day that I can just automate it. And live chat, it just reminded me. I can't remember the last time I went into a bank physically. Like, I don't know what a teller. Everything has kind of been automated, whether it be ATM or using an app itself. But Ken, I want to get into the number. You guys are talking about flatbed quite a bit on the DAT live show. Can you talk about one?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very concerned based on what we're seeing in the housing and construction markets, right? Whether it's remodeling, whether it's new housing starts. We're starting to see some of the data, preliminary data roll in, which you can, if you just Google it, you can take a peek at it. Essentially, they track home building contracts that were canceled before the delivery, right? And that's starting to go up. So basically, you've had flippers, and then sort of all like resale. The new construction is now starting to take some of the brunt of this. And that was what really, especially in the spring in the northern states, that's what really fuels a lot of flatbed demand. It does trickle down to dry van as well. So, I'm concerned. We're seeing some strength just due to energy. I mean, high energy prices will keep flatbeds, especially out west, moving. But a lot of these big civic construction projects aren't big draws to the for-hire flatbed market. There might be some ancillary demand there, but a lot of that comes from home improvement retail, single-family, multifamily construction, things like that. So I think it could be a bit of a tough year for flatbeds if the current market holds.
Yeah, with the recession too. I mean, when people aren't spending the money or redeveloping or putting add-ons to their home or even new homes, that's gonna fall by the wayside a bit, I would think. Until everything starts straightening it out. People just don't
rates too, right?
Right.
I mean, most people finance I used to remember the stat, but something like 75% of all home remodeling projects over $10,000 are funded with a home equity line, right? It's like, and those are variable almost across the board. Those are some, fraction over prime. And I mean, just me personally, I keep a home equity line just because, right? They give it to you when you refinance. And I just look at the statements when they come, even though there's nothing on there. And it went, I think when I got it, it was 0.9%, and it's like 6.8% now. So, your deck just got a lot more expensive, right? Because the wood's more expensive. I just saw this morning on the morning CNBC that beer prices are like egg price. So inflation and interest rates are like a universal pressure, and that pressure disproportionately affects flatbeds because flatbeds are traditionally hauling more durable type goods or into capital goods than dry van. I think people tend to go further down the price chain whenever things get tight, which is why I think you still saw a very healthy retail shopping season. But my guess is when the data shakes out, you'll see an average, you'll see the cost per sale over this retail lower than years prior, even though inflation was up, just because people were buying more cheaper things, if that makes sense.
Yes. I've always kind of said, like even you go to one of the saddest stories that I kind of see is that you see people doing their full grocery shop, like the Dollar Tree or like the Dollarama here in Toronto. It's just they've got to buy those cheaper things, right? And when it comes to talking about home improvement here in Toronto, like I if I was to switch the camera, there's like 14 trucks right now working. So there's still kind of that the housing market's still here on fire and things like that. And Jeff, I know you do pipe out of I think Houston. I think you said, has that kind of been related with you outside?
Things are still like moving. We're working on other things as well. But yeah, I mean, Texas is a booming market right now. I mean, it really is. There's a lot of freight coming out of there. But then again, when I was down in Dallas and Houston area, Fort Worth, you can just see all these massive warehouses. I was talking to Dean, not too long ago about that off of 35 down there, and they're just coming out of the woodworks. Literally, I mean, we're talking some mega warehouses, and it's like central New Jersey, near Cranberry, where they sold all the farmlands, and you see all Prologis million square foot facilities popping up all over the place, and they're getting filled. and we just went through the crisis of not so long ago with these warehouses being at full capacity, and you have Prologis, the largest warehousing company out there in the world. I think it was 964 million square feet of available space. They go out to their clients at one time and said, we're at 99.7% fill. We can't take any more freight in. If that doesn't tell you a story, I don't know. But I also read something as well over the next, I believe, 5 years that they're going to need another 1 billion square feet of warehouse capacity to fulfill the needs of the consumer. That's insane. I mean, just think of that. If they need another 1 billion, what is that going to do with all the shipments that they're going to increase quite a bit over, the next 5-10 years? Are we prepared for that? Those are the things you got to look at.
Yeah, I mean, again, lessons learned at hunting camp. One of my friends who's not even remotely related to the transportation industry, he's like, I noticed, and he's right, like right along where I live is right on the I-80 corridor. Like there's 80 and 90 that run just north of me. And they've put up like a comical amount of new warehousing space in the last 3 years. And those things go up quick, right? I'm sure you've seen this go up. They put those little stands up and they just whoop, and like you drive by 1 week but what you're seeing is they're going up and they're huge banners that they still have lease space available, which to me is a bit of a canary in the coal mine. We're directly feeding that Harrisburg West traffic, right? That e-commerce, So, it's caused me to really think about, are we getting ourselves into a glut? Like I agree with you long term. I mean, I think there's this long linear trend of growth, but I almost wonder if we're not getting ourselves into a short-term glut of space, or is that a harbinger of a potential economic slowdown that lasts more than a couple quarters? That's another.
Yeah, I mean, here's something for you to look at, Ken. I mean, look at the Allentown, Bethlehem area, PA. All right, you would not believe the amount of mega warehouses that erected in a very short period of time. And do you know that every single one is completely filled? So you have to. I would just, I would be interested to see analytically how much more freight is coming out of that area compared to like 2-5 years ago. I would say it increased quite a bit.
Yeah, Dean and I will take a look, but we know, I mean, Dean did a study about the main e-commerce markets, and Harrisburg is just, I mean.
Yeah, Bregnansville, Harrisburg, all them. Yep.
Yeah. And, it's such a departure because that's not the typical brick and mortar supply chain route. It's just not. Right. But I think what you're seeing is, we have a little bit of inside information on this that I can't, openly talk about, but you are seeing more traditional brick and mortar stores adopt some of the e-commerce shipping routes just to take advantage of the efficiencies that the likes of Amazon have created, right? So, they're essentially bifurcating their supply chain and fulfilling their brick and mortar through one, the more traditional established routes, but then also the direct to consumer e-commerce stuff. Why not leverage the relationships and the lack of congestion? There's a hell of a lot less congestion from Harrisburg to Chicago than there is from LA to Dallas, right? You're fighting for a lot less capacity and drayage and all of that kind of stuff. So it's been really interesting, and I think it will continue to develop. These warehouse folks must have strong signal to be committing that, because like the capital's got a lot more expensive and they're still putting up tremendous investment in warehousing.
Yep. So that's like the eye opener, right? What the hell are they doing? It's like, am I missing something? When is this influx of freight going to actually come into these facilities, and what does that mean for the infrastructure? I mean, a lot of people out there, they always put the cart before the horse, and they don't think about the alternatives and what's going to happen when this all evolves. I like looking at the what if scenarios. Okay, so if we do this, how is it going to impact everything else that we touched, all the touch points, right? And I'm just amazed like I said, I can't put more emphasis on it. I mean, these are big 100 to 200 door facilities. They're not small. They're not small. And the other thing too is that the brick and mortars at the malls, I think what happened is that during the pandemic, a lot of people got used to online purchasing and going to the Amazons and buying things like that. And they finally realized, you know what, I really don't have to go to a mall or a brick and mortar to go buy my stuff. And I'm getting it quicker. I don't have to waste all my time, all the gas, to go and do so. And I still believe that we're going to see those brick and mortars and those big malls start depleting, and that there'll be a lot more online purchasing just because the ease of doing business and the free returns, and they have free shipping. Yeah, right. I mean, I
think you hit the nail on the head with the returns, because delivery density is the main. So when people talk about e-commerce, like the people outside the industry don't understand exactly. They parrot the fact that e-commerce is more expensive than brick and mortar. But what the real reason it is that we all know is delivery density is a fraction of what it is, right? If you're bringing a 53-foot trailer of Xboxes to Walmart versus delivering God knows how many could fit back there to God knows how many homes, delivery density just mushrooms, right? But what they've solved, and I can just speak from personal experience with my wife. I mean, she'll buy a shirt in 5 different colors and 3 different sizes of each. It's 15 shirts. Try them all on at home. Keep the 1 or 2 she wants.
13 of them.
But instead of having to ship all of those back from her doorstep, she can go to Kohl's or CVS or
exactly do returns.
So I think by solving in reverse, like the reverse logistics, if you will, some of this, they've made it far less painful. Because I think clothing was like the last bastion of e-commerce, right? I mean, people, especially people that are like, I don't give a crap. I buy like 5 T-shirts every 3 years, right? Or whatever, golf pants. But as they've eased the return experience, there's really very little friction or hesitancy to buy things online anymore. Versus, our groceries get delivered. I don't know that I've been in a grocery store since before Christmas.
It's just kind of like automated from there. And like I love that I told with Jeff with Amazon specifically, they've changed their return policies that somebody will like package it up for you. You literally just got to give them the box completely open, and they'll seal it up and actually get your refund back the same day instead of waiting that 5 to 10 business days. And that's what we're seeing here in Toronto. And I think things and understand why that's kind of happening, Ken. I like that you kind of said that, hey, clothing, which is being one of the biggest things that people usually have a little bit of a pull for. Jeff, you said that we're seeing that they are closing down, and then condos are coming up because of it. So it's like relocation right now from there. So that was a great point. You both actually kind of mentioned that.
Yeah. And when you think about more online buying and home delivery and everything, going back to those automated vehicles and stuff, what are they going to do on the last mile and inside delivery and doorstep deliveries? I mean, I think we're far away from that until they figure it out. How is that going to evolve? I mean, seriously, how is that going to evolve? When you go from just arbitrary number, you go from 1 million packages to 15 million. How are you going to handle it? I mean, it's just, how are you going to handle those inside deliveries and doorstep deliveries?
Well, I don't think that becomes automated. I don't think that becomes automated because we're not talking about automated. Like it's all contractors, right? So they're not actually employees of Amazon. They just rent the U-Haul trucks and actually make a profitable business about it. But I think
I used to sell appliances when I was in high school, and the difference now, I mean, our washer and dryer, like, Murphy's Law, crapped out. We got 3 kids, crapped out like the week before Christmas. So I had to buy whatever, I went to like 10 different websites, and whoever had whatever in stock, whatever color it was, I bought it. And it was handled by RXO, and the experience was like light years ahead of what it was whenever you'd sell a washer dryer at Lowe's or Sears 10 years ago, 20 years ago, right? It's like constant communication via text. Your driver, the things arrived at our local, we're going to load it up. You're the 3rd in line for delivery tomorrow. We'll text you when you're 2nd and then 1st. And then here's a live tracking of the driver as they're coming to your house. Like, what the heck?
Well, and that's the downfall of Sears. I mean, look how many of their service centers and stores that they closed down because, look, do you remember the Sears catalog? It was the go-to. It was what people did. They had a huge 1.7 million square foot facility, I think in Torrance or Compton, someplace out there a long time ago. and they didn't want to go to the internet. Just imagine if they went to the internet and they put that catalog, where they would be today and how much money they would have made, but they didn't do that. They just fell, and they fell onto that Sears catalog that got distributed all over the country, and demise, they didn't follow the trend. And I think that if they did, they would have been, a vital part of what we do daily out there. But, it's a shame.
Yeah, I mean, I worked at Sears for on and off for quite a while, and I think Eddie Lampert's what ultimately torpedoed the company. Right, you bring a hedge fund guy in to try to manage a retail business, but yeah, it's sad. I mean, I'm lucky. We have the largest hardware store in North America that still services the appliances they sell and all that kind of stuff. So I'm fortunate.
There you go. There you go.
They still sell Speed Queen, which you can't buy at like Lowe's or anything like that.
Speed Queen, yeah, I remember that. That's pretty funny.
I'll talk about there. Talking about the consumer impacts and things like that. Ken, before we kind of get wrapped up here, what can you tell us about that you've seen with the reefer market specifically with the data?
I mean, so we had a pretty good December. I think better than a lot of us expected. And there was some weather, right? I mean, right before the holidays, it got really, really cold. There were some snow events that happened. I think it will slow down painfully so until produce starts picking up. It was a pretty poor produce year. I think Dean's number was California produce was down something like 22% year over year for all 22, and in total it was in the mid-teens nationwide. So it was a pretty poor growing year. Weather-wise, not ideal. California droughts, which maybe some of this rain is going to help rectify some of that. But most of the reefer folks I talked to are optimistic that this year is going to be a bit of a. They got hit quite a bit harder last year than the dry vans did, especially with the elevated operating expenses. They got to keep essentially 2 units running, right?
Yep.
So, it slowed down as you would expect. They don't have you're not returning cabbage and cucumbers the same way you are, clothes that don't fit. So they're slowing down now. This is that maintenance, retooling, furlough period that happens, and then I would expect probably by mid to late March at the latest things start to pick back up, and hopefully they have a good produce year this year. That's one of the things that's really hard to predict, right? We're not agronomists or whatever they call those folks that predict if it's going to be a good or bad growing season and how all that stuff's going to translate.
Well, pretty much it's all weather related too, and droughts and all that have play a major factor in whether or not you're going to have an outstanding season or a really piss poor season, so to speaking. So, look what's happening out in California right now with all those storms and everything. I mean, it's crazy. It's like feast or famine. First they don't have water, then they have too much water. And it's totally unpredictable. Very, very unpredictable.
And I think too, right? I am very excited to get into a year. This year should be fairly normal from year over year comps, right? I'm not going to have to worry about comping against 19, which was a dismally slow year. So that was 20. And then in 21, I was comping the toilet paper surge in the front half of the year and then the COVID boom in the second half.
PPEs.
All of last year, I was comping probably the best year in freight anyone will ever see in their entire lifetime in 21. So like in 23, we'll be lapping a fairly normal, if not, declining year. So by the second half of this year, our year over year comps should look sane, if not a little bit more closer to normal. It was funny. I'll kind of leave you guys with this.
Yeah.
Ian and I were chatting. If you polled 100 brokers or carriers or even shippers and asked them what was the better year holistically, 20 or 2022, right? You given the choice between those 2 years. I think they'd almost universally say 2020. They have more fond memories of 2020 because they remember the back half of the year and how busy it was. If you take 20 and 22 and just flip 22, it almost exactly mirrors, minus that little toilet, the actual lockdown. It almost is an exact perfect mirror of each other, coming up and then going back down. So, years in transition, when it comes down, we have that kind of human nature to respond more negatively to bad news. So for that year, we ended far lower than we started. But in 20, we entered that year really, really bad. I mean, we came off a really bad 19, but we ended the year great, right? So That's what I would leave you with. It's like, it's all about perspective. You know, we traveled the same amount of distance in both years. And if we came up the mountain, we had to go down the mountain. That just means we have the opportunity to go back up another, right? The industry, for as long as we've seen, does this.
Always.
And the peaks might be higher or lower in a given cycle, and the bottoms might be lower than, or, you know, are not as bad. But, you know, once we come down, we get the opportunity to go right back up, which I think is an awesome part of this industry.
And that's what we all wait for, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when it comes down to it, yeah, I mean, that's a great point. Great point, Ken.
And people don't make money when the reason 2020, if you look at 19, the market didn't move very much. It just stayed to where it was. And that's when very few people are making money. Static markets, these stale, stagnant markets, are when no one's really making any money, because you add value when markets are moving, you know? So that's what I'm looking forward to. That's what I worry about, right? So I wasn't on the train of 2022 being this bloodbath and, you know, whipping everyone into a frenzy, because I knew that once we landed, how long we stay at the bottom is what's ultimately going to cause a lot of collateral damage to the industry. So I'm hoping that we see some revitalization this year, because if not, that is ultimately what could be profoundly negative for carriers and brokers.
Great.
Really awesome. So we'll leave on that. You know, why coming out this morning, brother. It's been amazing. We got to have you on here more. I always kind of catch you on. Can you plug DAT IQ Live?
Yeah.
Yes, we're there every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific. We always have guests, you know, from time to time. I think we're going to have Larry Gross next week, which I don't even know how Dean landed that, but he's going to come on and talk about drayage and ports and all that. We've had a ton of questions about the drayage markets and how ports are going to operate with LA, you know, LA Long Beach regaining their status. So we're there every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Eastern. It's really a great way to connect with folks, and everyone's ripe with questions to start the year. I think everyone peters out towards the end of the year, like we had no questions, and now like yesterday, we literally couldn't stay around and answer them all. We'd have been there all morning. So
yeah, it was crazy. I was watching the YouTube like the feed, and yeah, it was blasted with questions. And you know, like for me, when my friend Jason Miller comes on, that guy is like,
even though he's a
probably
smart,
like
I like having him on. He's a Buckeye though. He got his PhD from Ohio State.
There we go. There we go. So from there. So definitely check that out. And we'll have Dean with us back with us next Wednesday.
All right,
Catch
thanks
you
for having
again
me.
at 12.
Oh,
a lot of fun.
Come back anytime you want. Appreciate your time this morning, Ken.
All right, thanks, guys.
All right, catch the replay 3 p.m. Eastern time. We're gonna hit the replay on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and more, where Jeff and I we continue our theme of planning and being strategic before you even pick up that phone call tomorrow. So we'll see you guys tomorrow, and everybody take care.